Hi everyone, I'm going to mark the homework for meeting 6. So here was the instructions. You guys needed to download a Python file and an example document. And then we only needed to change one place in the Python code to decrypt the example document successfully. You didn't need to change the file name. After that, save the Python file with the right formatting for file name and email it to me even if it doesn't work. You need to include the edited Python file and the decrypted plaintext. And here was the link to download the example document. If you had any questions, put them as comments and I will answer them right now. So this was the code. There was only one place that you guys needed to change. It was this line. The f name should be do not change this file name .txt instead of ciphertext.txt because we put the ciphertext into this file, which is over here. This is the ciphertext that we want to decrypt. So after you change this line, the code will work perfectly. So when we run this, it gives us all of the possible offsets, and then the correct offset is 25, so we put 25, and then it decrypts it and puts the plaintext back into the plaintext file, which is here. So that's everything you needed to do. After you did that, you should have sent the plaintext.txt to me with your Python file, which should have the right formatting for the name. So that was the instructions. Now let's look at the homework you guys submitted. First is Gary's. So last time in meeting 5, you didn't finish everything, so you sent it again, which is good. There are only 2 mistakes. First, when you define the variable or the function, you need to return new char with an A in it instead of this name, because we want to return this variable or this one, and all of these new chars have an A in it. If you do this, it wouldn't work, because the point of running this function is to find the encrypted character, and the encrypted character is given to one of these variables. So we want to run the function and get this variable returned to us. That's why we do return new char. The second point is, for the f name, you need to put .txt instead of just plain text. Other than that, the code for meeting 5 is right. So if we run your meeting 5 code, it should encrypt the plaintext.txt and put the ciphertext into ciphertext.txt. So your plaintext was, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And then here is the plaintext, or the ciphertext. And it gets put into the ciphertext.txt. So now your code works. There was these 2 places that needed to be tweaked. And here is the number 6. In this one, I changed the plaintext.txt into other plaintext.txt because I put both of your codes in the same folder, so I don't want to interfere with this plaintext.txt, so I used this other one. This was the one that I gave you guys for the meeting, so I changed it to this one. So for the file that has the ciphertext in it, it's this file, and not ciphertext.txt. This was the file that was sent to you guys, and I wanted you guys to decrypt, which was this one. It is not the same as your ciphertext file, so we needed to use this file name. We opened this ciphertext file and then decrypt it, and then put it into the other plaintext.txt. So let's run your code. And the good offset is 25, so we put 25, and the plaintext gets put into the other plaintext.txt. So your code works now. just remember to put the correct file names and make sure the plaintext and the ciphertext goes into the right files. And don't forget to add .txt afterwards too. Next is graces. I really like how you turned the parts that you don't want into comments to make like debugging the code more efficient. So for your code, I only found one mistake. It was the f name should be this file name instead of ciphertext.txt, because this was the file that was sent out to you guys that contained the ciphertext in it. So we wanted to decrypt the stuff in this file instead of ciphertext.txt. So I'm going to run your code, and because you skipped the finding the right offset and the picking the offset, you just put the offset to 25, so everything got automatically put into the text file without printing anything, which also works because you already know that the offset is 25. Also, for the comments, you only need to put one hashtag instead of two, but otherwise your code is working pretty well. Next is Dylan's homework for meeting 5. There wasn't any mistakes in your code. So this is the paragraph that you encrypted, and here is the ciphertext, which was correct. And when I run the code, it works well too. So good job. Next is Vincent's. So I compared your code with my original code, and there were two places that were different. The first one is the f name you should have chosen do not change this file name .txt instead of the ciphertext.txt, because this was the file that contained the ciphertext that I wanted you to decrypt. The second part is it is better to use tf.read instead of tf.readline. In our case, tf.readline would also work because we never skipped a line or anything in our ciphertext. But in real life, it would be better to use .read because you don't know if the ciphertext that someone sends you has any skip a line in it. Even if you do want to use readline, there is a certain way to use readline to make sure that you have read every single line in the document. You would need to use a loop. As long as there is something in the line, we print the line and then read the next line and gives it to the variable line. If the next line is empty, then the loop stops, but if there is something in the next line, then the loop continues. That way, it would be able to read all of the lines in the document instead of just one line. So the two places that I changed in your code is the file name that you want to read and how you read it. You read the whole document instead of just reading the line. Other than that, the code is correct. We will, if we run it, read the ciphertext in here and then find the right plaintext and then put it into plaintext.txt. So if I delete this and run the code, then it will become created again. The good offset is 25. And then we created the plaintext file, which has the plaintext in it now. So now your code is running successfully. Next is Brooks. So I'm going to look at your work for meeting 4 first. There is nothing wrong with this code, and I like how you put all of the different offsets here and compared them to see that they're all the same. So number 4 is well done. For number 5, there is one mistake. You should put a dot in after FW to make it close. If you don't put a dot, I don't think it would work. So for meeting 5, we encrypted the plaintext in plaintext.txt and put it into ciphertext.txt. So we encrypted this message into here. If I delete this and run your code, it should create this document again with the ciphertext in it. So I'm going to run your number 5 code. It encrypted this, possibly the most important code breaking event, into this ciphertext. And ciphertext.txt should have been created. Okay, so I found the error in your code. Over here, you originally opened fname, which is the plaintext.txt, and so that's why there wasn't any ciphertext.txt that got created. And when we ran your code last time, the ciphertext got put into plaintext.txt because that's what we opened here. So now, because we put ciphertext.txt to fwname, we want to open fwname in write mode and write new string into it. Now when we run the code, it should create a ciphertext.txt with the ciphertext in it. And so now it works. The two places that I changed in your code are fw.close and open fwname. Yes. Now let's look at your code for meeting 6. The only place that I changed was the file that we opened, because this was the only place that needed to be changed in the code. We want to open this file because this is the file that contains the ciphertext that I sent to you guys. Even though these two files have the same thing in them, the instructions were to open this one. So yeah, other than that, the code is good and it works well. So if we run this code, it would decrypt the message in here and put it into plaintext.txt. So let's delete plaintext.txt and then run your code. So the good offset is 25, and the plaintext.txt was created with the plaintext in it. So the code is good. Next, let's look at Brian's. So there are two places that I changed. The first one is we want to open this file because this is the file that has the ciphertext that you want to decrypt. But you shouldn't use the plaintext.txt because the point of this code is to decrypt, not encrypt. So you want to look at the ciphertext instead of the plaintext. So I changed the file to do not change this file name.txt. This is the file that has the ciphertext in it. The second one is offset is integer pick offset with a k in it. So this was just a typo and not a big deal. But if this part isn't right, then the code wouldn't work either. So just remember to check the spelling too. So now your code reads all of the ciphertext in this file and decrypts it and puts it into the plaintext.txt. So let's delete the plaintext file and run your code. So the good offset is 25. We pick the 25 and it will put this message into the plaintext file. Now the plaintext file was created with your the decrypted ciphertext. So now your code works. Next, let's look at Jesse's. So you tried to find the document by using the absolute path, but this is a good idea, but there is a few things you should know. For the absolute path, you need to use 2 backslashes. if you're trying to use a relative path, then it is forward slashes and just one slash. But if it's an absolute path, you use backslashes and two of them together. So if you are not sure what a relative path and an absolute path is, the relative path is a path that is relative to where your code is. So for the first line example, this text document should be under the same file as your Python code. For the second example, this file bbb.txt is under a folder called data, which is in the same location as your Python file. And for the third example, this ccc.txt is under the folder called user, which is under the drive D. So for the third one, it doesn't matter where your Python code is, but for the first two, they're called relative paths because they are relative to where the Python code file is. So you were trying to do the third one, which you need to put two backslashes. Also, I don't think you need an R here. So that's the part for the absolute path. And so I changed your code because I don't have this path on my computer. So I just put the file under the same folder as the Python code and then opened it like this. Other than that, your code was good. So now I'm going to delete the original plaintext and generate it again by running your code. So the good offset is 25, and then it puts the decrypted plaintext into the plaintext.txt successfully. So your code was good. Now let's look at Joey's. First, let's look at the one you gave for meeting 5. So you wanted to have the plaintext in yes.txt and then encrypt it into yes.txt, and that doesn't work really well because when we encrypt something, we want to create a new document with the ciphertext in it, so then we still have the plaintext. So I changed it into you still have the plaintext in yes.txt, but you put the ciphertext into yescipher.txt. That way you have a copy of both the plaintext and the ciphertext, which would be useful. Other than that, there was a mistake here. You don't need to put the file name inside the brackets, you just put tf.read. Over here, we want to open it in write mode because we want to write the ciphertext into the document. If you open it in read mode, then we can't write anything into it, and it would be useless. So if you open it in read mode, nothing would happen, but if we open it in write mode, we would be able to put the ciphertext into the yescipher.txt. Lastly, it should be fw.close instead of .closed. So now I've changed these parts of your code, and it should have the plaintext in yes.txt, which is here, and then it encrypts it with an offset of 1 and puts the ciphertext into yescipher.txt. So I'll delete this for now, and when we run the code, it will get created and the ciphertext will be written into it. So now it was encrypted and the yes cipher was created with the ciphertext in it. So now your code is successful. Let's look at your code for meeting 6. There were only 2 places. This one was a pretty big mistake because we want to mod n by 26 since there are 26 letters in the alphabet. This means that after we encrypt it, after we mod this, it will eliminate all of the offset that is not needed, because we know that encrypting something with an offset of 1 is the same as encrypting it with an offset of 27. So we want to mod it by 26 to get rid of all of the 26 encryptions, or like the shifts that we don't need. But if you encrypt it with or if you mod n by 25, then it is the same as saying that encrypting it by 1 and encrypting it by 26 is the same. But in reality, it should be encrypting it by 1 and encrypting it by 27 is the same. So we mod it by 26 to get rid of the 26 shifts that are unnecessary. So that's one of the mistakes I found in your function. The second one is I changed the ciphertext.txt into this file because this is the ciphertext that we want to decrypt. Even though ciphertext.txt has the same ciphertext, but this is the file that I wanted you guys to decrypt. And this was the only place that you guys needed to change in the code that I gave out. So I changed this mod by 25 into mod by 26 because there are 26 letters in the alphabet. And here we change ciphertext.txt into do not change this file name.txt because this is the file that has the ciphertext we want to decrypt. Other than that, the code works. So I'm going to test it now. The good offset is 25. And the plaintext file was created. So now in the plaintext, it has the plaintext. Plaintext file has the plaintext in it now. So the only two places was the mod by 26 and the correct file that we want to read the ciphertext from. Other than that, your code was good. Now let's look at Mitchell's. The only place that you needed to change was this. We wanted to decrypt the ciphertext that was in this file, even though it's the same as ciphertext.txt, but this was the file that had the ciphertext that I sent to you guys. So we wanted to encrypt or decrypt from this text file. Apart from that, the code was perfect. So this was the place that I wanted you guys to change. The good offset is 25, and the plaintext file was created with the plaintext in it after we run the code. So your code is good now. Next, let's look at Richard's. For Richard, good job for finding this place, because this was the file that I sent to you guys, so you want to decrypt this file. So your code was perfect. There wasn't any mistakes because the only place that you needed to change was this line. So now let's run it. The good offset is 25, and the plaintext file was created with the plaintext in it. So everything is good. Lastly, let's look at Williams. This was your code for meeting 4, but I put it in this meeting because I recently discovered it in my junk mail, so I'm gonna mark it now. The code was very good. There wasn't anything you needed to change. So let's just run it. So we are in room 222 with an offset of 2679 gets encrypted to this, and the encryption was successful. So good job, and your code was really good. That's it for today's homework marking session. Have a good day.